All right, so this is what I'm going to cover today, just at a high level. I'm going to cover technology in general, and then I'm going to go into a couple of my favorite technologies as well. This will, again, at a high level. Technology disruption is happening every single second of the day, every minute, and so much is changing around us. And I want to touch on a couple of things that I think are really interesting and fascinating for me. So first of all, who I am. Michael did a fantastic job already on my bio. But I'm a big believer in continuous learning, always learning, and that's why all of you are here today, I'm sure, is to learn about technology and find out what's on the cusp, what's coming, and how that's going to change and disrupt and continue to change our lives. So what I'm going to do is start off with this video. How many of you guys have seen this? Have you all seen this? Raise your hands, please. Okay, great. So I don't want to be redundant, but I'll let you watch this. So pretty neat, right? I mean, this happened not over a huge amount of time. I mean, this is just in the past, say about 15 years where it became really, really pervasive. And obviously, now things are moving to the cloud and getting even more advanced. I'm a big believer in technology. I love technology. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I learned about computers, at a very young age. I used to run a bulletin board service with a modem. So all this is super fascinating to me. So what I want to do is start off with a basic question. What the heck is a Raspberry Pi? How many people know what a Raspberry Pi is? Okay, quite a few of you. Any volunteers to explain what it is for the rest that don't know? Raise your hands again. Yeah, go ahead, or anyone.
It's a smallish device that's sort of meant to be, you can run just about anything on it. I'm not doing a very good job. Maybe Stuart.
Single board computer.
Speak up, please.
Standalone computer, single board computer.
Okay, and how big is it?
The size of a pack of cigarettes if you ever smoke cigarettes.
Okay, so on the screen it looks a lot larger, but it's about the size of a credit card. And I brought one today just so I can pass this around. So this is a Raspberry Pi, and I think this is a second generation. It's on the fourth, I believe, now. And I have this plastic case around it, so it's a little bit bigger. But I'll pass this around so everyone can kind of take a look. And what's interesting about this is that there's 4 USB ports. And I'm not selling this, by the way. I'm just talking about it. So I'm not sponsoring this in any way. I just think it's an amazing technology that's advanced so quickly. But it's got 4 USB ports, as you see up here on the front left side. You got the network jack. But obviously, we're all in Wi-Fi now. So you can plug in a USB that gives you the Wi-Fi. You have your input, which you can have as a keyboard. So that's a USB as well. Your output is an HDMI, which you see, I think it's this one here. So basically, you have the full capability of input, output on this small device. And you can use this for robotics. You could use it for a server, game servers, all kinds of cool stuff. So what's interesting about this is that technology gets faster and faster and smaller, as you see here. And this is just one example. You can use this for all kinds of, there's successful use cases around it. I'm not going to go into that, but if it is of interest, Google it, take a look, order one. And it only costs $30. $30 on Amazon. I mean, it's super cheap. The most expensive is probably buying all the different materials to the keyboard and stuff like that to make it function. But it's amazing. So let's move on to the next thing. What is Moore's Law? How many people know what Moore's Law is? Okay, probably most of you know what it is. But the reason why I'm covering this is because I just want to talk about real basics. And what that goes into is the fact that technology is moving so fast, the number of transistors that can fit on a circuit board, and obviously the cost going down as well. So this is a reflection, a direct reflection of this, and this will continue to compound. And that's the biggest difference between linear and exponential growth in technology. And I just wanted to point that out because really, as we move further and further in advance of technology, and as you see on this graph, there's been so much that's happened, and this is a reflection of what exponential really means. And this goes into another example. We as humans think in terms of linear, incremental changes, but the reality is it's truly exponential. So, and the other thing about humans is we adapt very quickly. I'll give you a couple examples. If you think about flying, how amazing is that? You get into an airplane, and you're in this mechanical device that takes off. You're flying. But I think a lot of us take that for granted. You know, like the first thing you do when you get on a plane, you got to put on your seatbelt. You try and figure out what movie am I going to watch? Where's my iPad? How do I go to sleep? But you're not really thinking about how amazing of a feat it is to be going from the ground and taking off, right? I mean, it really is truly amazing. In addition to that, you start thinking about things like Uber. How long has Uber been around? It's only a little over 5 years, like 6 years. But, well, it's been around that long, but I'm talking about higher adoption and obviously mass adoption, people using it. So in terms of when you're actually calling an Uber, the biggest frustration is, where's my Uber? Why is it not here yet? Let me use Lyft. So humans adapt so quickly to technology, I think you take that for granted, and it just becomes the normal thing. And I think that's important to realize when you're thinking about this. So where are we today? This is about a year old. But I got this from Singularity, but this is what's going to happen in the next 9 years. If we're in 2019 and you think we're already advanced, imagine where we will be in 9 years. That's what's incredible. This is truly hockey stick growth from an exponential perspective. And the reason is because there's a lot of technologies that are now coming together from a convergence. Let me also talk about this. Has anyone seen this before? Raise your hands, please. So I believe there's a speaker from IBM, but this, it looks like a fancy chandelier, but it's not. This is a quantum computer. So how much more advanced is this computer than a regular computer we use? So again, things are getting smaller and smaller. Technology is getting faster and faster. You have nanotechnology coming in. So you have such a huge convergence of all these things that are coming together. And that's what we also call the fourth industrial revolution. You have the combination of AI, AR, VR, 3D printing. Energy keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. All these things, there's a huge convergence of all this. So what's going to happen? So when I look at where we are in time, we are living in the greatest point in time in our lives. It's not going to get worse. It's just going to continue to get better. But there are a lot of things that come in play, such as privacy, data, governance, and things of that nature, and safety that come in play, which I'll touch on at a high level. So again, this is where we are from a graph perspective. We will continue to evolve and get better and faster and so forth. So I'm going to go into my first topic, which is AI. So we all talk about AI, artificial intelligence. But what exactly does that mean? I mean, a lot of people, and again, I want to cover really basics in terms of what does AI refer to? How do we use it? How do we deploy it? Yeah, it's a smart computer. But AI actually is not new. A lot of people think it's new, but it's actually been around late 60s and 70s. How and why? Because there's different types of AI. There's a rules-based versus learning. So rules-based is the one that's been around for a long time. And the way I would describe rules-based, and again, what I'm going to do is look at how we've evolved to where we are today, and then where we're going to go. So rules-based is more, think about it in terms of like a if-then-else. Rules-based is a AI or computer will only be as smart as a human that programmed that computer. So an example of rules-based is a game such as tic-tac-toe or chess. You have different rules that will govern the decision an AI will make. And obviously there's a finite number of decisions that a computer has to make. The other one goes into more learning AI, and this is more prevalent today. This is where you're able to give a machine a lot of different data points, and then the machine gets smarter and learns the same way a computer and a human does in terms of understanding where we're going. Does that all make sense, folks? When I'm talking about rules-based versus, okay. So an example of machine learning and how this works, and you get into deep learning and all these different type of machine learning things of that nature, and also there's open source platforms, Google with Tensor, and all kinds of great stuff. But this goes into more probability and making the best decision based on what the options are. So let me go into an example, pictures and photos. Now it's all, again, condensed on a cell phone. So if you look at your mobile phone, people take pictures all the time. This itself has been exponential in growth as well. The number of photos, I mean, I have like 3 cameras tracking me here. I have a couple cell phones, all these different things. So where does all that go? It goes to the cloud, the Apple cloud, the Google cloud. So at some point, how does that get processed? Well, here is a chart that actually shows the number of photos that we have in the world and how it'll continue to go up. And what's really fascinating about this is literally off the chart in terms of the number of photos. And if you look at this from 1933, from when Kodak and all the different things, and it only goes to 2013. I'm sure it's even higher. This graph actually looks like this. So what happens to all this data? Where does it go? Well, it feeds the machine. It feeds the AI. Has anyone seen this before? What does this have in common, these pictures of people up here? What do you guys think this is? Any guess? These pictures are not real people. An AI created these people. These people do not exist in the world. So what an AI was able to do, after looking at millions and tens of millions of pictures of people and human beings, they were able to simulate and what a human would look like. None of these people are real. This is the truth. Like, I'm not making this up. It's fascinating. So you think about what an AI is capable of is creating pictures of people that aren't even real. And it goes on and on and on. So an AI gets smarter. An AI about 5 years ago couldn't tell the difference between a cat and a dog. So people are like, hey, this is a stupid AI. It's not going to. Now it can because it was fed so much information. It's very incredible. I'm going to go into my next video here. Do you have volume?
And their ability to survive on
Have you guys seen this
$8 an
before?
hour in New York
This video?
City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees come together to pass a common, there's a bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community. I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama, when you're giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses.
America's businesses have created 14.5 million new jobs over 75 straight months.
We're developing technology. Every technology can be used in some negative way, and so we all should work towards making sure that it's not going to happen. And even one of the interesting directions is that once you know how to create something, you know how.
All right, pretty scary stuff, right? You guys haven't seen that before, right? So now you have fake photos with fake people, and you can also simulate voices and video. You're talking about fake news. Well, what do you think is going to happen next? But the fortunate thing is I believe in humanity. I believe that people will do the right thing. And I also believe there will always be a countermeasure to anything that happens. But what will happen is things will evolve, and you can detect what's fake, what's not. And of course, new technology will come along to solve those problems. We talked about rules-based versus learning before. An example of rules-based, here we have tic-tac-toe and chess. And pretty early on, AI machines were able to beat humans. It was very doable, very possible. But more recently, how many people know the game called Go? Please raise your hand. So Go is actually a much more complicated game. I'll describe it at kind of a high level just for the people that don't know. There's two players. One is black, one is white. And when you first start out, there's no pieces on the board. Or sometimes there's a handicap, and usually the white is the better player, and the black is kind of more handicapped or not as good, but it doesn't matter. And typically the handicapped person, like a black person, will put, or the person using the black pieces will put a piece on each of these dots. So it'll be like 5 or 6. But if they're an equal player, then they don't put anything on there. And the way the game works is one person puts one piece at a time on the board, and the objective of the game is to surround the other person. So for example, black here is trying to surround white, and once it's completely surrounded, you can take the pieces off. And what's different about this game is there's almost unlimited moves, as you can imagine. The strategy is to take over territory on the board. So until only recently, an AI was not able to beat a human player. but eventually it did. And that's what's fascinating, is that the AI was called AlphaGo. And there was another AI, the human eventually could not beat AlphaGo, so another AI had to beat AlphaGo, and there's been 4 iterations of this. I think there's been a documentary that's also made on this. But it got to a point where the original AlphaGo was only beat by another AI, I think it was Google, and then the next iteration. So now this is like 4 iterations of AIs playing each other, which is nearly impossible for a human to win. I mean, it's incredible. Same thing with poker. And AI is now capable of bluffing. And you can't even tell from a poker perspective. So this stuff has evolved and had so many iterations. And you know, this 18-time world champion, I'm sure, is crushed because he's never going to be able to win again. So the example I want to use is AI is very much like electricity. That's how I look at it. What does electricity do? Again, that's something else we take for granted until it's gone. And you're like, well, where's my electricity? How's my power? If you put electricity on a screwdriver, you have a power screwdriver. How amazing is that? You put electricity on a mixer, now you have this powerful mixer versus doing it using your hand. So we can't even imagine a world without electricity. Now imagine AI. You put AI on your car, it becomes an autonomous vehicle, self-driving car. You put AI on your refrigerator, all of a sudden it's ordering things for you. You put AI on any IoT device, now it's talking to other devices. You all heard of this, so it's nothing new. But if I were to tell you, I don't know, 15 years ago, that I can talk to my speaker and tell it what to do, you would think I'm crazy. But that's what happens today. You can yell across the room and ask your speaker, what's the weather today? You can ask your speaker, is there traffic? You can ask your speaker, play some music. But if you were to do that and talk about this 10, 15, 20 years ago, you would think I'm insane. But that's where we are. That's what AI is able to do. That's why if you infuse AI into almost any device, it changes, it transforms. So that's why I look at AI similar to electricity. So AI is going to impact a lot of different things. And again, this is just one technology I'm covering. There's a lot of other technologies as well. It's going to impact jobs, obviously. Certain jobs will be displaced and automated. We all know that. But I want to give another example of this, the counter-argument to this. How many kids do you know that want to grow up, that want to work in a sweatshop, a factory, doing the same thing every day? That's not their aspiration. You ask a kid, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a fireman, an astronaut, whatever it is that their aspirations are. They don't say, I want to grow up to work in a sweatshop all day doing the same thing, or a sewing machine or whatever. So how we live life would completely change. The other thing about AI is there's an inherent bias. And there's certain, I've read articles about how AI will replace a jury or a judge. There will be a bias that will be inherent in terms of past cases and how things are judged. And that's pretty scary. Also governance. That also has a big factor as well, and I'll touch upon that in a second as well when I talk about autonomous vehicles. So again, jobs will definitely be changed, and the direction of where we're going will obviously change as well. But I want to remind you that there's a better future, and that's really important. So have you all heard of singularity in terms of what the technical definition is? This is when AI actually becomes sentient, meaning they realize that they're AI and they're not humans. And that's what the technical definition of singularity is. There's also a university called Singularity University, which I would highly recommend. I had a great educational experience talking about things that are coming and the future. So 3 key messages. I kind of talked about this before, but I'll talk a little bit more about this when I get to autonomous vehicles. So let's move on to the second topic. I have one more topic after this to cover, then some kind of high-level predictions that I think will happen. So there's a lot of levels of autonomous driving from 0 to 5, and it goes into a lot of details. This is more of a graphical representation. I think this presentation will be available for everyone to take a look at, so I'm not going to read off of this. But a lot of people are scared of this, and the things that are in the media talk about the number of deaths. Here's another Tesla that ran into someone and someone died. And obviously that's bad news. It's not good for that person's family and the loss, and it's very sad, especially when they had no control. On the other hand, I also look at this as a way that it benefits humans and humanity overall. And why is that? Because if a car crashes, then that AI will learn from it. And then that AI will teach other AI so it doesn't make the same accident. As opposed to a human being that will drink and drive, get their first DUI, and the propensity to get the second, third, fourth DUI is a lot higher for a person that got their first DUI, statistically speaking. And that, there's no learning involved there. You know you're not supposed to, but maybe the penalties are not punitive enough to prevent that accident from happening again. I'm not saying that for all cases, but just the propensity is higher to drink and drive again. So in terms of an AI, it learns from that, and it gets better, so it doesn't make that same mistake, to the point where accidents will significantly and exponentially decrease, as we talked about earlier. So how many deaths are actually from motor vehicles? Well, it's close to 40,000. And overall, we're trending in the right direction relative to the population. But it's still too high, though. But AI is significantly going to, autonomous vehicles will significantly come down in terms of the number of deaths. And this goes more into statistics, and the important line is the red line that continues to go down. There's so much media on how bad the world is today, but it's really not that bad. If you look at all the statistics across the board, the number of fires and how many births and people are dying from that, and all kinds of things like that, statistically across the board, we're in a much better place relative to 10, 20, 50 years ago. And that's something to really keep in mind. The other thing is, how fast will the adoption be in AI and autonomous vehicles and driving? This, again, going back to that curve, in 2028, we will be in a completely different world than where we are today. One thing to actually talk about here also is, I'll touch on Uber and Lyft and all kind of these apps you can call a car for. So the reason why these companies, Uber, Lyft, and so forth, are successful is because they save you money. But at the end of the day, there's really no, and there's a convenience behind it as well. But realistically, there's no brand loyalty, right? Like as a consumer, I don't really care whether it's Lyft, Uber. I just want to get from point A to point B. That's all that matters to me. And at the end of the day, the reason why these companies are so successful is because not only the convenience from the app perspective, and you can call an Uber, and they'll come to you, pick you up, and take you where you need to go, but it's also less expensive. The convenience, the cost. If it costs more, would you really use it? If it costs double the price of a cab, would you use it? It's questionable. So typically, a cab is between $2 to $2.50 a mile. Uber brings it down to $1. You start getting autonomous vehicles, it comes down to 50 cents, and it's halved every time. And then let's say it's then electric powered, it gets even cheaper. It almost gets to the point it's the same cost as public transportation. And that's really what the reality is. And so when you look at the public market, capital markets of both Uber and Lyft, they lose money because they are subsidizing the drivers. So that's why they're struggling to try and find another business model to make sure that they can overcome that subsidy, basically. So I want to keep that in mind, but the bottom line, though, is autonomous vehicles will come, and it'll continue to get cheaper and cheaper, which is very good for consumers. I'll give you an example in terms of from a governance perspective. So this example is someone has to die. Unfortunately, someone is going to die. And sorry to be so morbid this early in the morning, but this is the example. So you have a driver, and either the passenger is going to die or the pedestrians are. Or I'll give you another example, which is it kind of ties more into governance. Let's say the autonomous vehicle is driving down the road, and 3 adults jaywalk. They run across the road. And the car, the AI is not going to be able to stop. But so do you run over the adults, and someone gets injured, possibly dying? Or do you run over 2 kids on a sidewalk that are waiting for the school bus? So what's interesting is, what's the right answer? There is no right answer. But it will have to be programmed by the AI, by the developer. And the problem is governance is so far behind in terms of technology. That's why things like Uber and Airbnb, all these things take off because governance cannot keep up. But in this case, there's human lives that are at stake. What I learned, the difference, however, is in the US society, in our society, American society, if someone has to get hit, you hit the jaywalkers. What's interesting is in Asia, you run over the kids. I mean, it's horrible, right? But again, someone has to get hit. That's a reality. Why in Asia do you hit the kids? Well, it's because they're replaceable. You can have more kids. I didn't make these rules. I mean, again, it's bad. So what I'm bringing up here is the ethics question. The ethics, because there is going to be trial and error when this happens. And I'm not saying one's better or not better and things like that. I'm just pointing out that these kind of decisions have to be made. However, on the bright side of things, how much time do I have? Am I okay? Is it time check? Wow, okay. Let me speed this up a bit. So car advertising, obviously you have a captive audience in a self-driving car, and that's really interesting what you can do with that. It's going to disrupt many industries such as parking lots, being able, alcohol, all kinds of things. So you guys heard that beep, right? There's the beep. So this is the benefit of actual AI. It will help you avoid accidents and force you to avoid accidents. But there's a ton of these videos where actually it's improving and helping lives and will decrease the mortality rates of people.
And he has to start talking about his and that's the question. And I think Chris Wallace
That just saved my
on these issues.
So anyhow, let's move on. So right now, Google has this going on. Really you don't need the steering wheel in this example. There's also basically drone technology being tested. I think the biggest barrier behind this is a lithium-ion battery. Weight isn't an issue. This can be electrically powered, and this is already being tested today. And obviously the full cycle in terms of the faster and cheaper energy gets, the more accessible driverless cars get, and et cetera. It's a cycle that continues. And it'll totally disrupt how we look at transportation. So let me go to the third topic that I find super fascinating, which is longevity. How many people know about longevity or read about it? So longevity has to do with the life expectancy of humans. So a couple hundred years ago, people did not see 40. And that continues to increase. So now we hear about people living to be about 90 or 100, 110. It's not unusual. But can you imagine that people will eventually live to be 120, 150, that'll be the normal? Again, this has to do with the convergence of so many technologies. And this is happening today, folks. I mean, and there's companies such as these as an example. I mean, I'm not into the biohacking and all these kind of things, but again, you should research all this on your own. And that's my objective today, is to open your eyes to amazing technology that's happening today. And there will be an inflection point, a prediction by Singularity University, in 12 years, an inflection point. For every day you live, you'll buy 2 more days. You'll buy more time. Like right now, for every day I live, I might buy, a quarter of a day. So that's why people live to be longer and longer. In 12 years, will be an inflection point where every day you live, you'll actually live to be longer. Another example where you can send all your DNA, or they'll do a scan of your health and actually customize the solution. So CRISPR is getting a lot more headlines about this, and I heard about them about 2 years ago. I think last year in China they were able to eradicate HIV, but there was also a consequence for that doctor. He did it illegally, so the Chinese government went down on him. And also, there's another consequence by eradicating. There's another. It made the life shorter. So now you're playing kind of God in this perspective. And again, this was just announced earlier this week. New gene editing to actually correct genetic defects. This is live in a live human today. So again, I'm not going to get into this, but this is the exponential curve that I touched upon earlier. So we all hear about Moore's law and how all this stuff happens, but it really comes into effect. And again, this is how you can extend your life, and there's a lot of research that's being done around this today. couple books. I've read 2 of them so far, but some other books I'd also recommend if you want to research more into this topic of longevity. So predictions. Let me jump right into this. So couple quick polls. How many people have seen Black Mirror on Netflix? Okay, it's very fascinating. Do you know what Black Mirror means? Black Mirror is actually the reflection on a cell phone. That's what that is. But they talk about being able to map out the brain and put it on a chip. And that's actually happening today in Silicon Valley. Map out the complexity of a human brain and put it on a chip. Black Mirror is super scary, but it's also very fascinating. How many people have seen Ready Player One? So that's a very good virtual reality show. For those that aren't watching it, I encourage you to subscribe to Netflix and watch these things and keep up to date. And that's why you're all here to learn. But that is an example of how you can monetize virtual reality, second reality, all these kind of things. So I can't go into 10 years. My crystal ball doesn't go that far, but I'm going to share some of the kind of future, what's going to happen of 3D printing. I'll give you an example of some of these incredible technologies as well. AI is going to continue to go. AI can already detect skin cancer with a 99% probability with an app that you download on your skin. And that's already here today. And obviously, robotics, all this will get faster, faster, and cheaper. I'm kind of skipping through a lot of this just because we don't have as much time. And energy as well. So solar is readily available. But what's incredible is I actually want to show you this. If you look in the actual picture, do you guys see this solar panel up here? In the picture itself? So that is larger than a spaceship itself. What they're able to do is take a 3D printer in space and print these solar panels, capture energy, because obviously the sun is always on in space. There's no sunrise, sunset. It's always on. The sun is always shining. So imagine you can capture and harness all that energy all day, every day, all night, every night. And now they're trying to figure out how do you then send that energy back down to Earth. And this stuff is happening today. And again, there's so much technology that's happening so rapidly that we don't even know all the things going on. This is a picture of me at Singularity University. It was a great learning experience for those that love learning, and I would highly encourage it. So what I want to leave you guys with is a challenge. How do you 10x whatever you're doing today and shoot for exponential growth versus just incremental? And I'll leave it with that. Any questions? Very quiet room.
Come on, guys.
Was that interesting?
Great job.
Okay, good. All right.